All right, here we go, our 5-1 lecture. I'm going to try to get this done in about 15 minutes. And you should have completed your reading guide first using the textbook. So that means you should be going through, filling in your reading guide first, and then listening to the lecture as if you were in class and adding to your reading guide, making sure that you understand everything. Okay, I think it's cool that the textbook uses the picture of our keystone species here. Remember, keystone species? And that is a species like the sea otter that's living here holding up the kelp. It looks like this little guy's waving at us. Keystone species are super important for ecosystem health because without our keystone species, we have entire ecosystem collapse. So I'm here after school, just gonna record this really quick before I head home on Friday afternoon. So, what characteristics do we use to describe populations? When we're describing a population, first of all, do you know where a population fits in an ecosystem? Remember, ecosystems start with our first level of ecosystems, which are species. Species are the all the organisms that live in an area of the same organism that can produce viable offspring. Okay, they produce viable offspring, and those species, all the species found in an area, all the individuals of the same species are our population. So when you look at a population, what factors do you look at in order to describe that population? 3 things. Geographic distribution, okay? That's the where are they? Where are they found? Density is how many per unit of area, how close they are together. And then the growth rate, are they increasing in size, or are they decreasing in size, or are they staying the same? So where are they found? How many do you find? How closely packed together they are in your area? And is the population growing in size, decreasing in size, or staying the same? So geographic distribution. So it describes the area that is inhabited by a population. Their range. Are they found just along the coastline, like the sea otters, just in the kelp forest? Or are they found in the deep sea? Are they found at the surface of the ocean, or do they swim from everything from the surface all the way down to the very bottom? Some animals are just found in the deepest parts of the ocean and not in the surface. If you're a limpet or a sea urchin, you're only going to be found in the intertidal area or in the tidal area, just at the shoreline. You're not going to be found out in the deep sea areas. Okay. Population density. This is a measure of how many individuals you have in an area. If you're a highly dense area, so if this is your area where your population is found, and would you say that this population is very dense as compared to right? This, you have a much greater population density because they're found closely, those organisms are found closely associated with each other. Now, if I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 organisms, but they were in a much smaller area and you have all 5, they would have a much greater density, correct? So densities can vary depending upon how much area you're giving them, okay? Population number or population size is just the how many. Density is how many per unit of area. So there's 2 different things, the difference between population size and population density. And then growth rate. Okay, so density can change. You can have the same population size, but if you decrease the size of the habitat and you don't change the population size, you can actually increase the density. Okay, growth rate. Growth rate can increase or decrease over time by different factors. Let's look at those factors. First of all, density. If everyone lived as densely as they do in Manhattan, okay, if we took and we look at how close together people live to each other in Manhattan, we could take the entire human race and we could fit in high rises in the island of New Zealand. So, oops, sorry, I went too far. If everyone lived as densely as they do in South Korea or New Jersey, then the entire density, the entire population of humans could live in a space the size of Russia. So obviously, New Jersey and South Korea, while people are still kind of crowded, they're not nearly as crowded as they are in Manhattan. They're not packed as densely as they are in Manhattan. So we'd be more spread out, but we would fit in a space the size of Russia. So that gives you an idea of population densities. Where are the people of the earth distributed? If you look at density, the darker the color, the greater the population density. And you'll see, where are most of the people in the United States? Most of the people in the United States are on the coast areas. And of course, the eastern half of the United States is a lot more densely populated than the western half. If you look at how densely populated Europe is, India, and China, it's no wonder those are our two most densely populated countries in the world. Here it's interesting. Here's the equator. The equator goes right about here. It's really interesting. Why aren't there a lot of people up here? Well, it's because it's a desert, not a lot of resources. If you look at the density in Africa, it's all through the central areas of Africa. So populations are not spread evenly around the earth. And it gives you an idea of just how less densely populated Canada and Alaska, Greenland is. So what kind of things affect the size of a population? Okay, 3 things. The number of births, the number of deaths, and how many populations can enter or leave. So how would the number of births, if you have a lot of births, if you have a high number of births, and a low number of deaths, then your population size is going to increase over time, right? If you have a lot of people coming into an environment or a lot of organisms coming into an area and not a lot of them leaving, that's going to increase your size. So populations are going to grow.
Ethan Abalos, please report to the guidance office. Ethan Abalos, please report.
It's after school, guys. You know how that is. Lots of people coming over the PA. So if population is going to grow, if the birth rate is going to be greater than the death rate, if more individuals are born in a species than die, then your population is going to increase. So if we look at the human population, throughout the history of mankind, it was pretty much stable, right? Little ups and downs here and there. Then we started to see an increase as we became more agricultural, as we started moving around and not being hunters and gatherers and staying put and farming. Then during the Dark Ages, we had a nice dip in the human population, and that was because of the plague. About a third of the Western Europe's population died off. And since then, since the Industrial Revolution, we've had this massive increase. And we call this exponential growth. And the human population is not showing any sign of stopping anytime soon. So how are we going to live on our planet, not just because of space, not just because of food, but how are we going to coexist and live sustainably so that we don't destroy the planet that we live on, right? So immigration. This word immigration, we talk about immigrants, people coming into an area. So think of immigration, the I for in, okay? The I for in. So immigration, when individuals come into a population, the population is going to grow. So why would individuals come into an area? Well, they're looking for some resources, okay? They may be searching for mates or food. So they come from an outside area into an area. And this is a good thing because it can increase genetic diversity. It brings in new DNA, okay, new DNA, so that we have new individuals in the breeding population. It's not just the same individuals breeding with each other all the time. Now, you have to not just think about humans here. You have to think of other types of animals, not just humans, even though we have immigration as a factor in the human population as well. So immigration, I, for a movement in. Immigration with an E, think of exit. Okay, this is going to be the movement of individuals out, and this is going to be causing the size of the population to decrease inside. Why would animals leave a population? Well, maybe they can't find a mate, and so they have to leave. They have to look for new food. They have to establish a new territory. There's a shortage of food. So, for example, in a pride of lions, there'll be one male lion with a bunch of lionesses. When the lionesses have cubs, if those cubs are male, once they reach puberty, okay, and they start to think about mating, they have to leave the pride and go find. They'll search on their own for another pride. Sorry, tired. It's Friday afternoon. For another pride of lions, and then they'll challenge that male, and if they're successful in that challenge, then they'll take over the pride of that lion, the lionesses. So that would be immigration, where they're leaving one population and searching for mates in another area. So here's a picture. We have a population here, population 1, and this is showing all of the genetic variation. So homozygous and heterozygous. These are showing, these individuals here are showing, I guess, the dominant trait. This would be the recessive trait. Well, if one of these individuals left that area, that individual would be immigrating because it's exiting. And as soon as it enters this new population, now it's immigrating because it's coming in. And it would be bringing its DNA, its genetic variation into that new population, right? And as soon as it starts to mate with these individuals, remember our good old Punnett squares, if it mates with an individual that's heterozygous, you're going to get more individuals that are going to have show that recessive trait. And so that changes how this new population looks because of the influence of the new DNA. So we have two types of growth that can happen in populations: exponential growth and logistic growth. Under ideal conditions, that means you're getting enough food, you have enough space, you have all the resources that you could possibly need. A population is going to grow, and it's going to grow in an unlimited way. It reproduces at a constant rate, and the population will become larger and larger until it approaches what could be potentially an infinite size. And we call this exponential growth. Does this look like something you've already seen? Yep, this is how humans are growing. So this is bacterial growth and elephant growth. If we took the elephants and we didn't have any predation, if there was no poaching, if they had plenty of food, plenty of space, could we, in 500 to 750 years, have a huge number of a huge number of 20 million elephants? Yeah, but is that likely to happen? No, because knowing what's going on with poaching. Here's bacteria. This could happen over hours or years, right? Hours. Bacteria grow. If you've ever gotten sick with a bacterial infection, you can get sick within hours, and that's because the number of bacteria can grow exponentially. So we call this a J curve. See how the shape looks like a J? Without the cross across the top. So the graph that we had looked at of the human population was showing a J curve. But in nature, exponential growth does not continue very long, because maybe you're going to grow and grow and grow, but then eventually you're going to use up all of your resources. So when you hit this imaginary, and we don't know where that point is for each population, but this invisible point, not imaginary, but invisible point called the carrying capacity, you're going to see a decrease in the growth rate. And you'll see the curve, instead of it going up and up and up forever, it's going to go up and then hit that carrying capacity. And we call this logistic growth. Logistic growth looks like an S. Okay, see? Logistic growth looks like an S. So this is an S-shaped curve. When you hit carrying capacity, and that dashed line there represents carrying capacity, we were in exponential growth, but once you get to that point where you use up all your resources, then you have a die-off of organisms. But see how it goes up and down around that carrying capacity. So you get a stable population, and it's in equilibrium. It's living in, think of it as balance with the ecosystem. Balance with the ecosystem. So if, I don't know what kind of fish this is supposed to be, but this fish maybe eats insects. And so the population of fish, when they first hatch, increases up to a point, and then they run out of food to eat, and so some of them die, and so it's living in balance with the food supply or the predators, the number of predators. So as resources become less available, the growth slows or stops, and that's logistic growth. And logistic growth looks like that S-shaped curve. So I'm introducing you to 2 or 3 new words right here. Okay, exponential growth. We have this point, this part of the graph is exponential. Okay, exponential growth here. And then we have carrying capacity here. And then the overall S-shaped structure of this graph is logistic. Okay, so carrying capacity, the largest number of individuals that the environment can support. So you see the growth level, the growth of the organisms leveling off until the growth rate is 0. What would make the growth rate 0? Well, births are equal to deaths. Okay, if births are greater than deaths, then your population is going to grow. If you have less births per deaths, then your population is going to decrease. Okay, so when you have births and deaths equal, then the growth levels off and the growth rate is 0. So my question is, how many children would you have per family to make human growth 0? Think about that. Let's do our quiz. Population density is the number of individuals per unit area. When the birth rate of a population exceeds its death rate, the population increases. An S-shaped curve on a graph of population growth is characteristic by logistic growth. What do we call it if it's a J-shaped curve? Yep, exponential growth. Exponential growth in a population slows down or stops as a resource becomes limited. Exponential growth rate means that each new generation of a population increases as the same rate as the previous generation. Okay, so that's the end of this section. I hope you like my video. I hope you liked my video. And I hope you tell as many of your friends as possible to subscribe, so my number of subscribers. So I just went over 15 minutes. This was 19 minutes long. Sorry about that, you guys. And I'll see you next week. Bye.